Now, last month, Chuck came to me to discuss the final quarter of my presidency and determined that, having guided the department through this transition, it was an appropriate time for him to complete his service.
President Obama putting the best face on what, from all accounts, was the forced resignation of Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. And we're back now with the panel. Bob, you have reported in depth about President Obama and his national security team. Aside from the personal stuff, Hagel didn't talk up in national security meetings. What does his ouster tell us about Obama and his policies in the last 2 years?
Well, at first it tells us that the world has changed. Hagel was brought in as a soulmate for Obama, somebody who wanted to get out of Iraq, out of Afghanistan, and no new war. And the situation has changed. And to shrink the military and kind of not be one of the A cabinet members. Now we have the ISIS problem and the new wars the president's declared, and people keep saying no, and this is a tough one for Obama. He's got to find an authority figure. He's got to find somebody who immediately people will say, ah, that's a leader.
Wait. Yeah. Some people say that, well, first of all, we've seen a couple of the top choices like Jack Reed and Michelle Flournoy say no. And there are a lot of people who say, you know, he really wants to run it from his White House and his National Security Council, and no authority figure would want to take that job.
Well, but that's what he's got to do. He's got to find one name that's been floated around. He's not going to be happy to hear this, is Colin Powell. Now, he's 77 years old, and but there is an authority figure, somebody who served as the chief military advisor in the first Gulf War when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Secretary of State, somebody who's been the national security advisor, somebody who could get up there and kind of, you know, he's friends with Obama. You know, 77, that's the old 67.
That's what we keep telling ourselves, right? Kim, you wrote a column this week in which you didn't sugarcoat it. You called Obama, quote, a lousy boss, and you said anybody who doesn't want to be a doormat, and I assume Colin Powell doesn't want to be a doormat, would be crazy to take this job.
Well, you know,
explain.
Look at the way Hagel was ousted. I mean, the trash talking behind the scenes, anonymously blaming the Obama foreign policy failures on him. And if you look back over the history of the Obama administration, this is not an aberration. This is how this president rolls. When they micromanage from the top, when things go bad, they say they didn't know, when they blame subordinates. Look at what happened with Obamacare. Look at what happened with Veterans Affairs. The president was asked a few months ago, how were you so slow to recognize the ISIS threat? He blamed it on the director of his National Intelligence Agency. So why would anybody want to come in and serve as a doormat? And I think that that is why a lot of people are, in fact, saying no.
Julie, one, do you think that's fair? And two, since we've had a trial balloon here for Colin Powell, do you think that's a serious possibility?
Well, I think Kim is onto something with this. I mean, if you look at Michelle Flournoy, who was a top choice after Hagel was pushed out, there are two reasons that people close to her have told me that she didn't want this job. Number one is that she didn't want it if she was going to be restrained in the same way that Hagel was. She wanted to have more freedom. And number two is she looked at this point that we're at the presidency and said, hey, maybe I'll wait and see if I could get this job under Hillary Clinton, for example, another Democratic president, you know, take it on at a time when the administration has a little more juice. When you talk about candidates, Colin Powell's name has been out there. People in the administration say that's probably not where they're going to go on this. An interesting name that has been floated, and administration officials say they're looking at this person very seriously, is Jay Johnson, who's the current Homeland Security Secretary. He is well respected both at the Pentagon, where he came from, and in the White House. The obvious downside of nominating him is that you risk having his confirmation hearing turn into a debate over immigration, which he's been deeply involved in, and then you create an opening at Homeland Security at the time.
Why is it that, because you've had Gates, you've had Panetta, now you've had Hagel, why is it that the secretaries of defense under this president have had such unhappy experiences?
People at the Pentagon say that in meetings, national security meetings, that Obama views the military very skeptically. It comes from his views on the Iraq war, on the way the Afghanistan war has been managed, that he just doesn't take their recommendations with maybe the same weight as some of his predecessors. Bob has written about this extensively. And
not just the military, I mean his defense.
His whole defense leadership, but particularly, you know, he is skeptical of military options that are put before him.
All right.
He doesn't like war. Obama doesn't like war, and that's reasonable, but he's declared one, essentially, now, so he's in a tight spot.
Look, there was one other big foreign policy development this week, and that involved the West's nuclear talks with Iran. They had a deadline of last Friday. They didn't meet the deadline, and they decided to extend the talks for another 7 months. Here is what Secretary of State John Kerry had to say about that.
We would be fools to walk away from a situation where the breakout time has already been expanded rather than narrowed, and where the world is safer because this program is in place.
Bob, they've already been talking for a year. Any reason to think that another 7 months is going to break the logjam?
Well, this could be the signature achievement for the president in his second term on foreign policy. I think they're going to continue to try to work in that direction. But Republicans are very critical of this. It's going to be hard to win a lot of widespread support for elongated talks. And I think just coming back to Bob's point about an authority figure on defense, you're going to have to work with a Republican Congress if you're the new Secretary of Defense. And you're going to have to get authorization for war, authorization for new troops. That's an important part of what the White House is thinking through right now.
And I'm not sure Colin Powell is Republicans' favorite Republican after he endorsed Barack Obama.
He has close relationships with McConnell and Boehner. I think he'd probably be a solid choice in that direction to help the president usher through his policies.
I want to ask you, Julie, about another aspect of this. How worried are White House is the White House about the fact that in next year, when Republicans take over the House and Senate on this Iran issue, that they may decide to impose new sanctions to try to ratchet up the pressure on Iran?
It's a big concern for the White House because even though the president could veto a sanctions bill, depending on how many votes it got, it's unclear whether Republicans could override that, but they feel like even the act of Congress passing new sanctions, even if they never were implemented, could damage this extension that we're seeing right now. They do feel like the response from Capitol Hill over the last week has been okay. You've had some Republicans that have come out calling for new sanctions, but you've had people like Bob Corker not necessarily calling for immediate sanctions. So they do feel like maybe they're going to be able to keep a lid on this over the next couple of months.
In about 15 seconds, what about the argument that if you put new sanctions on, it increases the pressure? It's a lever, it's a bargaining chip.
Well, I mean, that is the argument for people who want sanctions right now. We have Iran at the table. Let's keep new sanctions. Let's put new sanctions on them, keep up the pressure, and then they'll be more likely to make a deal.
All right. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.